Good afternoon, this is Julie Hull with Neighbors Real Estate Group. Today I want to talk to you about something that comes up in every single real estate transaction. That is the topic of agency. Who does your real estate agent represent? In the state of Arkansas, it is required that a real estate agent tell you who they represent, whether they represent the seller or whether they represent the buyer. Let's just start with what does it mean to represent the seller? Any real estate agent that gets involved with a seller and they sign a listing agreement, they are known as the listing agent. The listing agent has the responsibility to watch out for the seller. You know, they have a duty to protect that seller's interest. Next, let's talk about what does it mean to represent a buyer. As a buyer, you have the right to hire any real estate agent you would like. You're going to do that through a buyer's agency agreement. That's the hiring document where you say to that agent, we want you to help us find our home. And at that point, that agent is your buyer's agent. They have a duty and responsibility to promote the best interest of that buyer. Now, there's something interesting with both listing agents and buyer's agents. If I represent a seller and a buyer calls me out of the blue or comes to an open house, I don't represent them. I represent the seller. I represent the seller's interest. So any information that buyer gives me as to motivation, negotiating skills, how much they can actually afford, all that information, I have a responsibility to give to the sellers. And it works the opposite. If I'm the buyer's agent and I'm in the driveway and I run into the sellers and they start telling me all about their motivation to move, I have a duty to repeat that information to the buyers to help them negotiate. So you want to make sure that unless you are with the agent that you have hired to represent you, that you don't go chatty Cathy. Don't tell them information that you shouldn't tell them, because they likely represent the other party. And if they represent the other party, they have a fiduciary responsibility to share pertinent information that you give them with either the seller or the buyer, depending on who they represent. Last, let's talk about what it means if you have someone who represents both the buyer and the seller. Oh boy, let me tell you. That person is called a dual agent. Dual agency can be tricky because in a dual agency situation, you're not going to share confidential information. You're not going to share that personal information. When I have a seller and I'm representing the buyer and they ask me, is it a young couple? Well, that really isn't pertinent information as to whether or not you're going to accept their offer. We got to look at the facts of the offer. The opposite, when I have a buyer and they're going to go look at a listing that I have listed and they ask, well, how motivated are they? I'm not going to share that personal information with the buyer. We're going to deal with facts. If you like the house and it suits your needs, then let's make an offer and let's see where it goes. We're going to deal with facts, not personal information. As a dual agent, you have a responsibility not to disclose personal information to the other parties. I know, kind of crazy. Most dual agencies are not actual one person involved, like if I had the listing and then I took a buyer to see it. Most dual agencies are where you have a real estate firm with two agents under the same roof. One represents the seller and one represents the buyer, but because they're with the same broker under the same roof, it's dual agency. That is more common than one agent in the middle of two parties. Anyway, I hope I have enlightened you about agency. And if you have any detailed questions, feel free to reach out to me because I'd be happy to discuss it with you. Have a good day.